This is the Nike Control Ball, which is Nike's new top-tier ball that takes over from the Flight after 5 years of service. And this one claims to be 11% more aerodynamic, and also it promises that you'll score more goals with it, which is a pretty bold claim. So in today's video, I'll tell you what it's actually like to play with, of course what it does well, and also not so well, to hopefully help you decide if you should buy this on unisportstore.com in the link right up there or in the description or not. Let's fly. No, that's the old one. Yeah, I don't have anything, but let's go. So the Nike Control Ball is the first big update on the football front from Nike since the Flight was introduced in 2020, where it introduced its AeroSculpt technology for a more aerodynamic flight pattern. Now Nike have then continued developing on that and have now introduced what they call OmniSculpt, which according to their testing is even more aerodynamic, 11% more to be exact. See, according to Nike, the new embossed OmniSculpt grooves here that are scattered all over the ball with the little tri-star shaped grooves, the embossed lines, and of course, naturally, the edges of the 4 panels will create a lot less drag as the ball flies through the air. And if you're like me and you're definitely not a physical scientist and you don't really know what drag refers to, let me try and paint you a little bit of a picture here. Because if you have a smoother football that flies through the air, once it hits the air will start to move up and kind of around the ball. But because there isn't much texture or any grooves on the ball, there isn't really anything to grab or interact with the air, which means that it will just continue flying, onwards in a straight line more or less behind the ball that goes for over and under it. And that kind of creates, a vacuum behind the ball that drags it a little bit and slows the flight down. So in other words, a smooth football, I know it might sound counterintuitive, but actually is a slower football when we talk about airflow. Whereas on the other hand, if you have a lot of grooves and a lot of texture, like on the Nike Control here, when the ball hits the air moves up and around the ball, but then the ball actually starts to grab and interact with the air, pulling it with it a little bit down behind the ball. Now that means that the vacuum behind the ball is smaller, thus the drag is smaller, and that increases the flight speed. Apparently, according to physics. And I know, again, it sounds a little bit counterintuitive, especially because the grooves here, they don't seem to be as many as on the Nike Flight, and they're definitely not as deep. But apparently, according to Nike's research and their testing, this does have a smaller drag than the Flight and any of the other previous Nike balls. And apparently, as another thing, it also improves the consistent accuracy of the ball, which in turn should lead you to be able to score more goals more consistently with the control. Which is, of course, a statement that I'm gonna get back to a little bit later. What's also new though is that Nike have gone from 6 panels on the Nike Flight to only 4 panels on the Nike Control, which kind of decreases the need for seams and stitches and connection points between the panels, which Nike claim lead to an 18 science.
The flissive defer.
But it should be 18% rounder, basically. And while my hands are definitely not, spherical measurement tools, I guess.
Cool.
However, my eyes, with my glasses on at least, are pretty sharp, and I can still see that there are these little, hard spots, peaks around the edges, which are definitely not round. So there is that. However, what Nike also say is that because the panels are now fewer, they're larger, which means that you also have a bigger sweet spot on each panel. And that means that it doesn't really matter as much, at least, where you hit the panel in order to get a more consistent touch and feel, which I guess is really nice. So there is a lot of newness, but the thing is that while it might be that the Nike Control Ball is technically more suited to scoring more goals and giving you more control, the thing is the real football isn't played by a computer simulation or with a robotic leg. It's played by real players in the real world. So what is it actually like to play with in the real world? Well, I'm glad you asked. Well, to be fair, it does feel quite a lot like the previous Nike balls. So of course the Flight, the Merlin, the Autumn, and some of the Nike balls before that, in the sense that while I do feel that the control ball here feels a little bit faster and maybe also ever so slightly more lively when you really put your foot through it, it also still retains some of that slightly harder, more raw and direct feel when you strike it hard. That has kind of become, you know, the Nike match ball DNA over the years. And I wouldn't necessarily call it heavy to strike because it's not, but I wouldn't say that it has the slightly bouncy, cushioned, compress and expand foamy sensation that the Puma and Adidas and to some extent Select balls have. It is instead just a little bit harder and a little bit more raw. And I guess slappy, if that's a word. It's a good way to, yeah, slappy, I guess. However, it is also quite a stable ball. And despite feeling like it has a little bit more of a burst of speed, it does also give me more reliable vibes, both in the air and on the ground, than previous Nike balls did. And again, no, it doesn't really move that much, it's not that fun and spectacular, and you don't score unexpected knuckleball bangers, but as a footballer, I also appreciate to know that the ball, when it does something unexpected, either it's because I told it to, or it's because I messed up. Not because it's been built with some sort of magical, jazzy vibes to it. But yeah, up to you, but I actually like that. One more thing I also do appreciate is actually the grip texture. Nike call it All Conditions Control Ink, which is basically just like little silicone micro texture print on top of the ball, which is really nice because it's grippy to the point that you get enough tactility and texture to feel confident when you're on the ball, but it's also not sticky, meaning that when you play with it on a dry pitch, a dry natural grass pitch or an AG pitch, especially with grip knit boots, it doesn't feel as if the risk of getting stuck and falling over is as high as with some of the other match balls out there, Puma and Adidas in particular. So yeah, neat. But we of course also need to talk about kind of the elephant in the room, which is the claim that the Nike Control Ball will facilitate you scoring more goals and putting the ball in the top corner when you want it. And look, it's a nice ball to shoot with. I'm not gonna deny that. It feels pretty fast, it's direct, and when you hit it right with enough power, you can really get it to move. And that's nice. But the thing is that when you take a shot or make a pass, there are other things than the ball that factor into the quality of that shot. That could be external factors like the pitch or the weather or other stuff, but definitely also, and most importantly, is your shooting technique. And I fully trust Nike when they say that they've actually found it to be more consistently accurate when they use their robotic leg in a controlled environment, or their computer simulations, or probably all sorts of AI and other stuff I don't understand. But I don't know about you, but my leg and my technique definitely isn't robotic leg levels of precision. So, you know, I'm all for marginal gains, and improvement is always nice, but to me the whole improved accuracy, score more goals thing probably shouldn't be the main selling point when you decide to buy the ball. Look, if your technique is good, you will still score a lot of goals, but if your technique sucks, this isn't going to magically turn you into a finishing god that just curls it top corner every time. It's all up here. And of course here.
So the Nike Control is a good football. Arguably Nike's best ever football in my book, and also one of the best balls that's not used in a major tournament. It's good if you know what you want, and the new tech is solid, but in the end, it depends on what you're looking for in a football. Because the control ball might split opinion a little bit with the way it feels.
But at the end of the day, what really matters is how the ball feels. And if you're after a direct, pretty fast, but also very reliable football, the Nike Control is actually really solid. And speaking of solid, it also feels very sturdy and actually seems quite durable. And what I also found was that it holds air exceptionally well. So it's 3 days since I pumped it, and still now, after playing a lot with it, it just feels almost close to being fully inflated. So that's really nice. And in general, a pretty nice football. But with that said, given the slightly pingy, plasticky feel, it's probably also not my favorite match ball out there, which, shameless plug, you can see my full top 5 of my favorite match balls somewhere on the screen. But before you go and do that, tell me what you think of the new Nike control ball in the comment section right down below. Maybe, if you want it, go and buy it in the link to Unisport right over there. And of course, also subscribe to the channel and like the video if you had a good time. And then you can go and watch the top 5. And with those words, I'll be signing off. Cheerio.